Imagine being a decorated US Army general trained to lead and defend your country, only to be unjustly arrested by a local cop simply because of the color of your skin. But what happens next? Karma strikes back in a way no one saw coming. Stick around for the full story. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this explosive encounter turns everything upside down. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. It was a crisp autumn morning in a small suburban town in the heart of the American Midwest. The streets were lined with colorful leaves as the chill in the air signaled the arrival of fall. Officer Derek Wallace, a 15-year veteran of the local police department, sat in his squad car parked at the corner of Elm Street and Pine Avenue. With his aviator sunglasses on, he looked every bit the small-town cop, a man of authority who prided himself on keeping order in his community. Wallace was known for his tough stance on what he called outsiders. To him, anyone who wasn't a local was immediately suspect, especially those from urban areas or of different racial backgrounds. His behavior had raised concerns among some residents, but Wallace was careful not to cross too many lines in a town where his badge gave him near absolute authority. A sleek black luxury car pulled into the intersection, its tinted windows making it impossible to see the occupants inside. Wallace's eyes narrowed. It was rare to see a vehicle like this in his town. The car stopped at the red light, and Wallace decided to investigate. The driver of the car, a middle-aged black man dressed impeccably in civilian attire, was unaware of Wallace's scrutinizing gaze. His name was General Thomas Lawson, a decorated 4-star U.S. Army general recently retired after 35 years of service. Lawson had moved to the area to enjoy a quiet life after serving his country, but today was anything but peaceful. As the light turned green and Lawson proceeded through the intersection, Wallace flipped on his lights and siren, pulling the vehicle over. Lawson frowned but complied. He had dealt with worse situations in his military career and believed this to be a routine stop. However, as soon as Wallace approached the car, it was clear that this encounter was far from ordinary. Wallace strolled up to the driver's side window, his hand resting casually on the holster of his gun. General Lawson rolled down his window, revealing a calm yet puzzled expression. "License and registration," Wallace barked, his tone sharp and dismissive. "Is there a problem, officer?" Lawson asked, keeping his voice steady. Wallace glared at him. "You were driving suspiciously slow. This isn't the city. We don't need any trouble around here." Lawson raised an eyebrow. "I was obeying the speed limit, officer. Is there another reason you stopped me?" The exchange should have ended there. Lawson knew he had done nothing wrong, and Wallace should have known it too. But Wallace wasn't just checking for a violation. He was asserting his authority over someone he perceived as an outsider, as someone who didn't belong in his town. "Step out of the vehicle," Wallace ordered. Lawson hesitated, his military instincts warning him that something wasn't right. "I'm not sure that's necessary, officer. I'd prefer to stay in my car unless you have a legitimate reason for this." Wallace's face reddened. "Step out now or I'll arrest you for resisting." At that moment, Lawson understood that this situation had escalated far beyond a traffic stop. He carefully stepped out of the vehicle, keeping his hands visible. Wallace immediately grabbed him by the arm, spinning him around and forcing his hands behind his back. "What are you doing?" Lawson demanded, his voice remaining calm, though anger brewed beneath the surface. "You're under arrest for resisting an officer's orders," Wallace sneered. Lawson's military training kicked in. He could have easily overpowered Wallace, but he knew better than to make the situation worse. As the officer roughly handcuffed him, a small crowd began to gather, some recording the scene on their phones. Word of the arrest spread like wildfire. Within hours, social media was ablaze with outrage. Videos of the incident flooded timelines, capturing Wallace's aggressive treatment of Lawson and the obvious racial overtones of the situation. Hashtags like "Sing Justice for General Lawson" and "Giles racial profiling in suburbia" trended nationwide. The police department, a small force unused to this kind of scrutiny, was thrown into disarray. The town's mayor, Sarah Mitchell, a well-intentioned but often ineffective leader, found herself in the eye of a political and social storm. The local news was now camping outside the police station, demanding answers. Inside his holding cell, Lawson remained calm. He knew that once his identity was confirmed, the situation would be resolved, but he also knew that the damage had already been done. Being a decorated Army general did not exempt him from racial bias, even in a quiet suburban town. The town's police chief, James Watson, an old-school cop nearing retirement, wasn't prepared for the backlash.
"You arrested a damn U.S. Army general," he fumed as Wallace stood before him, unrepentant. "I don't care who he is," Wallace replied. He was acting suspicious. Chief Watson rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of the situation. "You better pray this doesn't blow up in our faces."
But it was too late. The story had already reached national news outlets, and pressure was mounting for the town to take action. As the media dug into Lawson's past, they uncovered a legacy of honor and heroism. General Thomas Lawson had served in several overseas operations, leading troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. He had received numerous awards for bravery and leadership, including the Silver Star and the Distinguished Service Cross. His reputation as a man of integrity was beyond reproach, making the circumstances of his arrest all the more appalling. Reporters flocked to his home, eager for an interview, but Lawson remained silent, refusing to comment on the incident. His wife, Jennifer, a former lawyer, had immediately begun preparing for a legal battle. They knew that this was no longer just about an arrest. It was about confronting the deep-seated racism that had led to this moment. "I won't let them drag you through the mud," Jennifer told him one evening. "This town needs to know that you deserve respect, not suspicion." Lawson nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He had fought for his country, risking his life to protect the very freedoms that had been denied to him that day. Now he would fight another battle, one for justice, not just for himself, but for all the black men and women who had faced similar injustices. As the legal case against Officer Wallace gained traction, things began to fall apart for the small-town cop. Investigators from the state police were called in to review Wallace's record, and what they found was damning. Complaints of racial profiling, excessive force, and misconduct had been buried over the years, swept under the rug by the local department. Wallace's bravado quickly crumbled under the pressure. His past actions came back to haunt him as more people came forward with stories of being harassed or mistreated by him. Lawsuits piled up, and Wallace found himself facing not only legal troubles but also public scorn. His neighbors, who had once supported him, now distanced themselves, afraid of being associated with a man whose racism was now on full display. The town's mayor, Sarah Mitchell, held a public forum to address the community's concerns. It was meant to be a moment of healing, but instead it became a reckoning. Residents of all races voiced their anger at the systemic racism in their town, demanding accountability and justice for General Lawson. When the trial finally began, it was clear that Wallace had no defense. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and even his own department testified against him. General Lawson, dignified as ever, took the stand and recounted the events of that day with calm precision. The jury deliberated for only a few hours before finding Wallace guilty of multiple charges, including false arrest and racial discrimination. His sentence was swift and severe, a message that this kind of behavior would no longer be tolerated. As Wallace was led away in handcuffs, the irony was not lost on anyone, especially him. The man who had once abused his power now found himself at the mercy of the very system he had corrupted. For General Lawson, the victory was bittersweet. While justice had been served, the scars of that day would remain. Yet he knew that his experience had sparked a necessary conversation about race and authority in America, a conversation that he hoped would lead to lasting change. Months after the trial, the small town began to heal. The police department underwent a complete overhaul, with Chief Watson retiring and new leadership brought in to restore trust within the community. Mayor Mitchell pushed for reforms aimed at addressing racial bias, and training programs were implemented to ensure that what happened to General Lawson would never happen again. As for Lawson, he returned to his peaceful life with his wife, grateful for the support he had received, but ever mindful of the challenges that still lay ahead for others. His story became a symbol of resilience and justice, a reminder that karma, in the end, always strikes back hard.